all the notification stuff go off. Hey, if you got this part of the video, you've got the live unedited edition, Home Gadget Geeks, Thursday night, August 17th, 2023. It's 8 p.m. in the Central Time Zone. If you've got this any other time than that, means you got the recorded version on our live channel. That's okay. Hang tight. We're going to get started here in just a minute. This will give all of the YouTube notifications, all that other stuff, a few minutes to go off and for folks to join us live. So appreciate if you are watching live, checking in the chat room. I've seen a few of you already, Ken, John, or Tony, whoever you are. I have two listeners who they like to kind of razz each other on Twitter back and forth. And they're never here, Shane. They're never here at the same time. So I'm kind of wondering if they're maybe the same person. Like,
something like that.
You never know. I've never seen John and Tony in the same place at the same time. So Shane, thanks for saying yes to this, by the way.
My pleasure. It's so great to be here.
Good to have you here. So, and Dyer, right?
Dyer, that's
Dyer.
right.
All right. I just want to make sure
you got somebody, John Biggs, back there who says, "Come back, Shane."
Yeah, we have a community. We've been doing this for a long time. We all kind of started in the home server space. So there used to be a show called the Home Server Show, and we'd all have these gigantic, home servers that we built. And then I started doing this one, 10 years ago, 11 years ago on General Tech. So we have a good group. Yeah, we have a good group of guys out there. Yeah. So, and we used to get together. We haven't done it in a while, but we used to get together out in Indianapolis once a year and do a big tech meetup and stuff. And guys would bring stuff and we'd share stuff and have presentations. It was a good time. We had a good.
That sounds like fun. You got to get that going again.
Yeah. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I've threatened to do it a couple times out here in Omaha where I am, but I just haven't got it pulled off. Okay. Let me kick this thing off. I want to hold on my promise and have you out of here in the next, or at least see it's six for you. So we'll say 7, right? You're on the West Coast, and we'll get you out of here by then. So, all right, let me get the script up. Here we go. This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks, show number 582 with guest Shane Dyer, recorded on August 17th, 2023. Here on Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home. And today, maybe outside of your home, news, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here in a beautiful Bellevue, Nebraska, although heat warnings for Saturday. Shane, maybe you'll have something to say about that as we think about lawns surviving these hot days. But of course, we'll post the show, and I'll have a few tonight, some links for you to follow out at the AverageGuy.tv. Big thanks to Jay Franzi, joined us last week. Caught up with Jay a little bit. Always good to have him on. Jay, thanks for coming on. And a big thanks to our Patreon subscribers. If you want to join the Patreon team, if you're finding value in the podcast and you want to give back, join our Patreon team, the AverageGuy.tv/Patreon. I introduced him here just very briefly, but Shane Dyer has opted from he is from, I should know this, Irrigreen, and Shane's coming in from the West Coast. Shane, thanks for coming on tonight. Great to have you.
Oh man, such a pleasure.
Irrigreen. Tell us a little, before we dig into that, let's get to know you a little bit. I know there may be a serial entrepreneurial story here for you to tell too, but give us a little bit of your background. How'd you get to where you're at today?
Wow. So I think I've been a geek kind of all my life, playing around and cutting up computer cases since high school. And then I really fell in love with some of these new ideas back in the old ages before there was a term called IoT, with making little things talk to the internet. So I was one of Professor Teresa Meng's students at Stanford studying electrical engineering and computer science, and doing some of the first work on sort of like distributed wireless networks, and then figuring out what it meant when something that wasn't really looked like a computer could talk to the internet, which was just kind of booming at that time.
Yeah. I think a lot of innovation came out of that not that just that class, but those classes, that area. I grew up in the Bay Area. I was I left in the middle 80s. I think we thought it was booming, and there was a lot of cool stuff from my dad was an IBMer. So I spent a lot of time in that space. I left moved overseas, came back just 3 years later. As some amazing stuff came out of that. Let's talk a little bit about Irrigreen and the company that you co-founded and CEO of now. Give us a little background on that.
Well, the previous company I started was one that worked on like internet connected things. So if you've ever had one of those garage doors from like Chamberlain that you can open with your phone, I'm sure a lot of your customers have those. We were the company behind that, and Whirlpool's smart connected devices, and about 60 different early IoT devices we basically did the embedded system software for and then ran the cloud services for. So we sold that company in 2017, and there were two things that I knew, which was I wanted to work on one great product instead of a platform with lots of them on there. And then I also really knew I wanted to do something that was amazing for the customers, but also like sort of game changing for like, how light we were on our planet. I have two kids out here, and I'm in California, and it wasn't clear we'd have water.
Yeah. You
guys,
it
was like, what was it? I wasn't sure what they're going to be drinking by the time they're grown up my age. So
now today, I mean, you had a good winter, and so today maybe the water conversation in California has toned down just a little bit. But I remember,
I think we need like 4 more of those before we catch up.
But it's funny how fast that changes things, right? I mean, how you get a little bit of rain and you got a lot of rain. Down in Southern California, where it was particularly bad, I mean, they got enough, but it is still, we have water issues. We're gonna have water issues. Using water wisely is just going to become more, getting it. In this case, we're talking about irrigation, right? Water irrigation. I go every morning I go for a walk. I leave the house at 6:20. I get back at 7:20. I walk through the neighborhood, and in the summer, I bet there's 3 or 4 houses that are literally watering the street, right? The water is running down the street. And I don't know about you, but I mean, my water's not free.
No.
I have to, and I kind of wonder, like, and I'm a kind of a cheapskate. Like, I'm one of those guys who hand waters his lawn just in the right spot, so I'm not kind of wasting it. When I saw what you guys were doing, I thought, "Ooh, this is a nice fit," because I'm kind of a cheapskate on the water side, anyways. But
well, my partner Gary is an inkjet printer inventor, and if you know about inkjet printers, it's about putting liquids in very, very precise places so you can create these beautiful documents and pictures. And so when you're an inkjet printer inventor and you walk down the sidewalk like you did, and you see the driveway being sprayed and the sidewalk being sprayed, and probably a little bit more geeky, but if you actually look at what's happening on the lawn, all those different arcs from those sprinklers are overlapping, and they're kind of like stacking up water. So there's way more water in one part of the lawn. So you got like a swampy spot, and then just a little bit of water in some other parts where you got like a dry yellow spot. And if you're an inkjet printer, it just drives you crazy. And, it becomes one of those problems you just have to solve. So before I even joined Irrigreen, Gary was working on this problem and basically creating a printer for water. So instead of like spraying it out, it's actually, has 14 individual printing ports, and it's printing that water out across the lawn. So it's putting water exactly where you want it in a perfectly even distribution. It's just amazing.
How do you, when you think about this, we're showing, this may be a good one if you're listening to just the audio. This may be a good one to come over. We're going to show some pictures on YouTube. Go youtube.com/Jim Collison. You can watch the video over there. But how do you, like, as we think about this technology that we're seeing now, which is you've kind of, I'm assuming you're mapping the lawn. We'll talk about that here in just a little second. But how does one get to the point where you've got to train this thing where all the grass is, so to speak? And I'm assuming it waters more than just the grass. You can water your shrubs and trees with it as well.
Yeah. So, the difference about this, and as you can see it, is you just get this, instead of having those mechanical sprinkler heads all around the edge of your yard that kind of do their best to spray in, but spray the sidewalk and everything. You just have one little sprinkler head right in the middle of your lawn, and it's a digital sprinkler head. So it's kind of like having this little Bellagio fountain that's right in the middle of your lawn, and it pops up, and then it basically traces exactly the contours of your landscaping. And the way you set it up is there's just an app on your phone where you literally pop the sprinkler up, and then you can kind of drag these points around. And as you drag the point on your screen, the sprinkler is actually spraying following that point in real time. And you end up just, really easily setting up this little dot to dot pattern. So if, you wanted to water a star, you could water a star. If you have a weird curve around your shrubbery, it'll water that weird curve around your shrubbery. It's super easy. It's like a little video game.
Yeah. Does it give me the ability to also control the amount of water that I deliver to a particular spot? I've got some in my front lawn. I've got some drier spots than in some places than others where it needs. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the way the water is controlled is this is really cool, but there's actually a server that we have up there that collects all this weather data, like how hot it was, how much wind there was, how humid it was, whether there was cloud cover, how much it rained. And it does this big calculation around the scientific term is called evapotranspiration. But what that basically means is how much water left your soil. And then we put exactly the right amount of water that particular spot in your yard needs to get it completely covered so it stays green. It's just, it's amazing.
And that math, not done with sensors. We had Gavin Campbell on the show a couple weeks ago. He's a unraid home assistant guy, and he's actually gone to putting a few sensors around his yard to kind of measure, okay, this needs more moisture than that, and then sets his sprinklers. There's a whole host of manifolds, smart manifolds now that help with this kind of stuff. But this really is a single sprinkler that covers a certain square footage, right? And then
correct.
You're saying you kind of train it, you train it to land in other areas, and then it also is keeping track of weather data.
That's correct. And the nice part about the internet weather data is you can also get future weather. So you can kind of sit there and say, okay, it's going to rain tomorrow or the day after. And so I'm going to wait to water to see how much I can pick up from the weather so I don't have to pay for that water if it's going to come from the sky.
Yeah.
So it can be smart, not just in terms of what's happened and how dry the soil is now, but also what's going to happen and how can we, kind of play some chess here so that you have to have the lowest possible water bill.
Yeah. So when we think of states like California, I'm sure where water is really, really expensive. I am sure when we think of from a installation and cost of the equipment standpoint, there's a pretty quick turnaround from an ROI perspective. I'm here in the Midwest. Is that a little tougher of a sell when we think of we just don't the water it's getting more expensive, to be honest. Still not like the West Coast.
The funny thing is California is not even our biggest market. It's really like Texas and Colorado and all these other places where the water rates, they're not as high as California, but they've come up so quickly. And people are looking at like, oh my gosh, I'm paying $150 or $200 a month for my summer watering to keep my lawn green. And as soon as it gets to like be a bigger yard, like a 7-zone yard, something like that, which is kind of like a decently sized suburb, home in somewhere like Texas, the cost for installing this is exactly the same as a regular system, but this is something that could save you, $500 to $1,500 per year off your water bill. So in that case, you'd be kind of financially insane to put in a regular mechanical irrigation system. Now, the real reason a lot of people do it, though, isn't just for the water savings. The real reason is like this, because it precisely waters your lawn, you just get greener grass. You don't have those wet spots and those dry spots that everybody fights to try to grow that really great, kind of lawn of your dreams. And I think that's the primary reason why most people put it in.
Yeah. When you think of a single, so I've got a single head that's covering a certain set of square footage. Ken asked this question. Let me get to it from chat. He says, what about across sidewalks? So if I'm thinking about a zone and I've got a sidewalk going through that zone, is there ways to account for that? Can you shut a sprinkler off as it goes over that? How do you account for
concrete? The really cool part about a sidewalk is if you think about those, like we call them like vanity strips, which are those big strips on the outside. If you have to do that with like regular sprinklers, you have to put sprinklers in about every 4 feet. So if you had like a 60-foot by 5-foot vanity strip, you would actually need, somewhere in the order of like 15 sprinkler heads to cover that one place. But you could do that exact same watering with just one Irrigreen head. So one Irrigreen head would water the same amount that you'd have to have 15 regular sprinkler heads for. So it's, for covering those weird shapes. Anytime you've got one of those weird shapes, this technology really shines.
I've seen similar products, maybe like on Facebook as I've been looking around, and it seems like they were all units that were above ground and they were out doing something similar. They were shooting water out, delivering water exactly to where, and it seemed like they were external units. Are those competitors? Am I remembering
Not
things
really. I
right, or
mean,
how
there
does
are
that
some
work?
smaller things that like water pots or water
Okay.
very small lawn areas.
Okay.
But if you have any decently sized landscaping, you really need to have like an installed system. Like
Okay.
something that you just drag hoses for probably isn't the right thing. So having, if you've got a certain amount of grass, having something that's permanently installed that you can water these things for you, you kind of create this really easy, you put one of these heads in, so easy to install. Like most people, like a lot of our people do it DIY.
Mm-hmm.
So put it in themselves, or if you need to hire a contractor, you can too. And then you get this kind of fire and forget irrigation system that's gonna save you a lot of money and grow you early green grass.
If I did DIY, would I need to hire a plumber to put, because I don't have irrigation today?
Mhm.
Would I have to hire a plumber maybe to do the manifold piece to supply the water to the outside?
The key
And
part is there's no manifolds or valves for the
okay,
system. So all the valves are in the head. So it's much, much simpler. So instead of having like 40 heads and valves and manifolds, you'll just basically have one pipe that connects everything. Now, if you don't have like a backflow, you might have to hire a plumber to basically create your point of connection for you
right,
to
right.
put that in. But
Mm.
that's just kind of a simple project from there. And then from there, it's just PVC or poly or whatever you want to use to go out to your yard. And so it's about 80% less digging and trenching and plastic pipe. So if you think about it, like, first of all, if you're a DIY job, I don't want to dig that much, right? I'd rather dig 80% less if I'm going to put something in my yard.
Yeah.
And then the other part is just so much less to maintain, like 80% less pipe, that's less things to break and crack and leak. Instead of having a subway under your yard. So it's, we find that we've really nailed that DIY niche for sure. And then we also have some people that'll just say, okay, that's not my deal. So I'm going to go hire a contractor. And if you decide to do that, your landscape contractor that you already talked to, or, that you already work with, it's really easy for us just to give them the instructions to put it in for you.
I'd be the perfect candidate for a single head. The front
Mhm.
lawn, by the way, you can go out to their site, Irrigreen, IRRIGREEN, just like it sounds.com. And you have a mapping. You can actually, it says see your yard, click on it, it'll drill you in, and you can put your address in, it'll show you from the sky what it is. I have this nice square yard out front that fits your dimensions really nicely. I get away with
Mhm.
one.
Nice.
The backyard is we're doing some work on it, and it's more shady and it doesn't actually need the water, to be
Got
honest.
it. Yeah.
So the front would be great.
Mhm.
Is it worth it for a one head? We're so used to irrigation systems that are, 15 head sprinklers. Is it still
Yeah.
worth it if I just have one sprinkler to put in?
Yeah, we actually sell a lot of those one head systems. So it's a little more expensive because you have to buy the controller too for that. But remember that same controller can control all, if you have like drip zones or valve zones, it's backward compatible with all that technology. So you can plug in all, if you've got an area like, hey, my garden, I've got drip in there and I don't want to change it. Great. You can just plug those drip line controls, those controls for the valve for the drip line right into this controller.
Mm,
And, I mean, for a lot of it is like, instead of having like, 15 heads now, you just have one,
yeah,
right, to
yeah,
take care of, which
yeah.
is just much nicer. And it's in the center of the yard rather than on the edges where it gets run over or it gets hit by string trimmers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've all had that experience where,
Yeah.
spring comes, you turn on the irrigation system and you're like, oh, there's always like, that handful of heads that sprang in the wrong direction has to be replaced.
Dig them
And
up,
so they're kind of
replace
a
them,
nightmare.
get dirt into the system. What about here in the Midwest? We experience very, very cold,
Mm,
very cold winters.
mhm.
How does this hold up? It's only, it's less heads, but how does it hold up with the printer technology and
Yeah,
the
well,
winter?
the good news is the printer technology was largely developed in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. So all the first
Mm.
installs were in one of the coldest places in the US, lower 48. And a lot of our testing goes through, really, really cold temperatures on this. There's actually a sensor in the thing, so if it's below freezing, it won't run to make sure it doesn't damage it.
Okay.
And
Okay.
also tested in really, really hot climates. We have this thing in Phoenix, Arizona, on in people's houses there as well. And additionally, like, when we manufacture these, we obviously go through this accelerated lifetime testing in these large, envelopes. So we've really done our best to make it kind of battle tested.
Ken, let me get to a couple of comments from chat.
Yeah.
Ken had said, unfortunately, I have a big tree that's 20 by 5 in the vanity strip.
Mhm.
So central location is out.
Yeah.
If you got in situations, you're kind of thinking about, well, okay, so central, there may be something blocking that.
Yeah.
Does that move? Can you move to a dual? And is it the same thing as far as
Yes.
efficiency at that point?
Yeah, there's a really, yes, the efficiency is exactly the same. So you'll save as much water if you need to use two heads, but there's a really, really cool tool on the Irrigreen website. So if you go to www.irrigreen.com, there's like a your yard and you can put in your address there. And then you can pull up your property and you can actually like do a little dotted line, like trace the areas that you want to irrigate. And it also gives you the ability, it's like, do you have a tree? And so you can put an obstacle in too. And then you can drag these like digital heads over and it'll actually show you where they spray. So you can figure out exactly how many of them you need and what you do need to do if you have any obstacles to make sure you've got both sides covered. So it really helps you set up and go, okay, I've got this tree in the middle, so I need a one head on one side and the other head on the other side, and that's all I need. So it's a really kind of fun way to see. But the coolest part is it actually goes back to 3 years of weather data for your particular location, your latitude and your longitude, to figure out how much water you'd have to use to keep grass alive in that, and therefore how much water you'd save with a digital system like Irrigreen versus a regular mechanical system. So you can look it up on your water bill and you can quickly kind of see what your savings would be.
Yeah, and I've always I've kind of gone the tough guy method, which is some irrigation, and then as soon as it gets too hot, I let the lawn go dormant. For me that works. We have Zoysa out front, which is very very. She's done really really well here in Nebraska with the hot humid summers. The back Kentucky bluegrass in the back that works great with the shade sun mix. Had some trees taken down this last year, and the lawn's doing really well back there now that it's getting a little bit more sun. But we had a super dry spring, and then it has not stopped raining since the 4th of July. Would the system know? So for me at this point, with the constant, we've been getting rain every couple of days. Would it just stop working at that point? Would it just, for the most part, shut off and not water again until it needed it?
So what it will do is basically start adding that rain as those inches of rain as additional irrigation inches. And then as it comes up to a watering, let's say you've set it up to water Monday, Wednesday, Friday. As it comes up to that Monday, it'll look at it and go, nope, I've got enough rain so far, so I'm just not going to turn on today.
Yeah.
And it'll basically wait until there's a deficit, an irrigation deficit that's built up. Check in the future to see if there's any rain coming. It can kind of take advantage of, but there isn't, then it'll put that much water down. So it's really intelligent that way.
In some spaces or in some places, folks water their lawns in really hot periods. They'll water in the morning, say they go the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which is really common, right? But then if it gets really, really hot, they're going to give it a quick spray in the afternoon to kind of cool down the grass during periods where it might be 95 to 105. Is something like that, would I have to specify if I wanted to do a grass cool down routine in the afternoon just to splash it? Is that something I can schedule or specify? Would it do it on its own?
You have up to 4 schedules in an Irrigreen system. So if you want to put that little afternoon splash in just to kind of cool down the house a little bit, you can just have that, just get a little on in the afternoon to sort of take the edge off. And again, if it's really hot out, the grass will like it too.
Yeah, the grass is just dying. It's like, help me out. Although with it's been crazy since, the 4th of July, we've had all this rain. The Zoysa out front, I mean, it looks like Florida in my house right now. Which is for us, this time of the year is very, very unusual. Usually we're dying. Everything's, it's August, it's Nebraska, it's hot, right? But we've been kind of fortunate. How about as we think about, we also spend time talking, well, maybe not we, but I spend time talking about robot lawnmowers, right? Is this something that is there any integration to pair together to say, hey, look, the sprinkler's on, don't run the lawnmower? Or have you come across any of those situations?
Yeah, we're starting to create those integrations now because we have a lot of people that have smart homes. So if there's somebody out there that's not got a smart home and they're interested in Irrigreen, we'd really love to work with you to figure out where the integration points are. But there's some great tools like IFTTT and things like that as well to kind of create some really interesting integrations between different smart home devices. That's an area that, the last company we kind of grew up in. I think we did like 5 or 6 integrations for every company we did. So it worked with. So So it's something I'm very familiar with, but I'm always interested in like really cool customer use cases for this, because I think, a lot of the joy people get is like, my home is really smart. I have my Ring doorbell. I've really invested in making this, an intelligent space. And then as soon as I go outside, there haven't been very many options for thinking about how that's more sophisticated. It's really, if you look at traditional irrigation technology, it's really similar to the way it's been done for like 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
And so, making that jump to digital, where instead of springs and gizmos, you're actually using software to put the water in the right place and use this app on your phone to really tell it exactly what you want it to do. It's not only like, much more efficient for you, but it's also like, you have a barbecue and you bring somebody over and they're just amazed at what's happening in your yard. Like, it's really, feels like what the future should be. We don't have carburetors on our car anymore. Fuel is too expensive and precious a liquid. And in the same way, don't think we're going to have mechanical sprinkler heads anymore either. It's just water's going to be too expensive and too precious. Yeah. We're really going to start using software instead of, springs and gizmos to make sure we get it in the right place.
I'm starting to see a drive back to, well, hold on. Before I just say that, we're looking at the head right now. Again, on the screen, if you want to catch our video. It's as I'm looking at it, it's got multiple different size holes in the head here. I'm assuming it's kind of picking up both distance and direction and where it needs to go and what it needs to do. Is that kind of how this is engineered?
This is real brilliant. So I got to credit Gary for this, his inkjet printing background, but there's 14 individual printer ports and they're all different sizes because basically, there's very small ones that are going to water right around the head. So you don't need to have another sprinkler head sprayed at the sprinkler head. It's going to cover all the area all the way up to it. And then you have, larger ones at the very end that are throwing like 30, 35 feet that are putting the water down at the very edge that it's spraying to. And if you actually watch the head, it's really cool. Like as it comes in close to like spray in close, you'll actually see the head speed up. And then as it sprays further away, you'll see the head slow down. And all of that is the computer algorithm, basically to make sure there's a completely even layer of water across that entire area that you're watering.
You're saying it's physics is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, no, super cool.
And a little art and poetry. It's also just fun to see these things like tracing around, tracing these shapes around your yard.
Yeah.
Especially in that sort of, morning sunlight.
I might get stuck out there on my walk, just standing there watching this thing,
Yeah, we get that a lot.
Take off. Yeah, it could be a little addicting. We are seeing a movement kind of across the country to do less lawn and more water tolerant plants, more rock, maybe like rock gardens or rock gardens supported by some of those kinds of things. I'm assuming I could retro. I don't have to necessarily have an acre of lawn or a perfectly flat green lawn. I'm on a hill. Does it take into it? I'm asking two questions at once, but let me ask the hill question. I'm on a pretty steep hill going down. Does it take that all into account when it's
the really brilliant thing about the head on the hill is that it basically goes around once and puts the water down. And then it takes about 5 minutes to come back around again and put the other piece. So it lets the water that's put down soak into that space before it comes back. Unlike a regular sprinkler system, which just drops the water, the soil fills up, and then the water runs down the hill and you get a dry spot on top and a wet spot on the bottom. It's kind of got this built-in cycle and soak. So it just puts down a small layer of water and then waits for that to be absorbed into the ground before it puts the next one down. So it's really, it's a really great, we're seeing a lot of people choose this, especially when they have hilly areas. Now, the other question about it was, well, are we getting smaller lawns? And I think that's a good trend. We're starting to see that. Now, the problem is as these lawns get smaller, they become really weird shapes. They're next to the pool and they become these little oblong areas and they're really hard to irrigate effectively. So that's where, Irrigreen does really well on, we're kind of the master of weird shapes because of that software programmability for where it's going to spray. But you can't, there's a lot of these, places like LA where, they've kind of paved the entire area and removed the plants that were natively there. And so what that creates is if you don't have green plants, and a cactus in many cases won't do it, then you create these heat islands where the local climate changes, up to, like 2 to 5 degrees hotter than it would normally be. So we have to have these plants around us in order to have these places be livable. It's just we have to water them far more intelligently.
So does a system like this allow me, if I need to do some spot watering, in other words, instead of watering a lawn, I'm watering a shrub. Can I, does it take an account for shrubs and shoot it over there and come back and shoot it over there again? Is that possible?
Yeah, what we usually see is usually it's a lawn area in front, and then there'll be different shrubs around. So when you program your pattern, you can basically just spike it out to the shrubs. And depending on how much water you want on those shrubs, you can make the spikes different widths depending on how much water that particular shrub needs. Because generally the shrubs need less water than the lawn.
Yeah.
So that's usually how that's controlled.
Okay. Yeah. That's my front where I would put something like this. And let me show just really quick. We'll bring this up. This may be some other things that you want to. So this is looking down at my house as it's here in Bellevue.
Oh, nice.
And
you found your lawn print.
I did. I did. This is the front. This is the front here. And I'm assuming then I can take this and start, I just start clicking on it, right? And it's going to build for me this. And I know there's a tree, but that tree is actually in the neighbor's yard. And it just hangs over my yard.
Got it.
I could go up here and then come here. I've got a sidewalk like that. So my lawn looks a little bit like the picture you have.
I'd have to connect it to that last dot there.
Up here. Do I need to get it in the last?
Click that last dot. There you go.
Right there. Does that work? No.
Click your first dot. There you go. Right there.
Okay.
There you go. Perfect.
So I've got that. So that's my lawn area.
Yeah.
And then we'll do the next step. And it says, do you have any trees or objects in your yard? I'm going to say no, because I don't. And then I'm assuming, okay, so step 4, add your heads.
Yeah.
And
so click on that. Click here to add a sprinkler head right there. That button on the bottom. Yeah. And then you can just drag that guy right over.
Okay. So
this is the fun part. So as she's dragging it over, it's basically showing him that he can water the entire area with just one head.
So I'm going to drop that in there and say, click here click it. No, I'm done. I don't, it's just the front yard that I'm talking about. And then it's going to go through and say your water savings.
Yeah. So for your place in Nebraska, it would save about 25, almost 26,000 gallons of water.
Now, I don't irrigate today, but what you're saying in this is compared to traditional irrigation systems.
Correct. Mechanical irrigation system.
Right. And so in theory, if I was doing that, you're calculating based on the water costs here about $2,000. Oh no, this is the system cost.
That would be the cost for the system. So you have to look at your water bill and how much that many number of gallons would cost you. And if you have like a tiered water bill, you're kind of looking at that tier 3 rate, because usually you're in tier 3 if you're watering out, if you're doing a lot of watering outside.
So the system cost includes everything I need to do to attach the water, to get supply, to take it out to the location, and to set it up. This is assuming a DIY. This is if I did it myself.
This assumes a DIY. That's right. So you'd get a controller, you'd get the head, you'd get basically the cable that goes from the head, and you put it in the same trench as the head itself, and connect back to the controller there. And then if you wanted to add another head, it's like about $280 to add another head if you wanted to do like the backyard. Mm-hmm. So once you've got the controller set up, it's pretty affordable to do other zones. Yeah. And remember, one of these heads replaces 8 to 10 regular mechanical heads.
My backyard now, it's covered in trees in this picture. It's a little unfortunate that I wish it had the winter version of this, because the leaves are gone. But for me, if I were going to put a second head in, I'm assuming what I need to trench from the front to the back to do this?
Not necessarily, because my guess is you probably have like a hose bib,
I do have water supply in the back.
Yeah. So you could just go straight from that water supply, so you don't have to trench from the front and the back.
Would I need another controller? Would it be another?
No, you could just bring the cable right along the side of the house or something like that back to where you put the controller on that. But you can have 2 different points of connection for the water. And that a lot of times most systems do, just because it saves on trenching.
Yeah. Well, so for me, if I'm thinking about let's just say it's $2,000 to put the first sprinkler in, and another $250 to put the second sprinkler in.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so now all of a sudden I start thinking maybe I'd do a smart one in the back too.
Yeah, there you go.
If it's going to be, I mean, if it's going to get me another sprinkler head, and I'm going to get another option back there.
And, the great thing about your back is when you put it in, it's going to ask you some questions about, what kind of grass are you growing? You say, okay, I'm blowing bluegrass back here, like a cool weather grass. And it's also going to say, how much shade do you get? And you say, well, I've got all these trees. I get a lot of shade in the back, right? And you'll put that in. And it will basically really decrease the water that goes out to that backyard because it doesn't have the full sun like the front yard. So it's pretty intelligent in terms of making sure you're getting exactly the right amount of water on.
It's a seemingly tough sell for a guy like me who hasn't had irrigation to begin with. A little bit easier if I've had irrigation in the past. But if I don't have it, what's the good, I'm thinking about putting something like this in. It's only an expense for me, right? It's only, I kind of think like, well, this is just I mean, I haven't been watering before. What do you say to me for a guy who's didn't have an irrigation system to begin with, but maybe he's thinking about wanting to water his lawn better?
Yeah, I think, the first one is like, this is hopefully get you on the path to sort of growing that lawn of your dreams. It's kind of a lot of the motivation is I want to have the very best lawn. I really want to have these plants be well taken care of. And, I think the thing that you'll get with this that you don't get with the hose is just so much more precision.
Yeah.
Also, our time is worth a lot. So dragging hoses around and getting it set up, and there's always a lot of oops. I know when I did it, like I'd always like put the sprinkler on and then I'd start watching something or a football game would come on TV and I wouldn't shut it off. And before I knew it, I'd sort of like flooded the side of the house.
Yeah. Yep.
So just having that like completely, it's got it, fire and forget. I can pull up my app. I can make sure it watered and see how many gallons it put down. And also like the fact that it's going to do it just perfectly means I'm going to save a lot of money on water. So over time, 5-6 years, my initial investment is most likely and almost, many areas of the country has already paid off.
Mm-hmm. If I've got some, this is more of a personal question for me only, but I've got some planters that sit just outside the lawn, like on the patio.
Yeah.
If I shoot them just right, is it possible I could
water them away?
Shoot it into the planter.
Yeah.
See, I would mess around with that head. Would definitely. I'd be out there for a couple days.
The other thing is, if you've got the kids over or something else like that, especially if they can't see you're in the house with your smartphone, you have the best robotic super soaker in the entire neighborhood.
Just turn it on and soak them down.
So yeah. When your sister is back there sunbathing.
Yeah. Oops.
Right.
Sorry that came on.
It's a lot of fun.
Kevin asked this. Oh, by the way, Kevin had said when you mentioned Minnesota, he said, "You betcha, Minnesota," right? A little bit earlier.
Yeah.
He said, "Can it be programmed for different areas? Like my garden is next to my lawn, but the water needs would be different. So if I've got the right space and maybe I've got lawn in between that and a vegetable garden or a flower bed, can I separate those zones out?"
Yeah, this is the really cool part about Irrigreen is that all the software we have in the controller and in the heads is upgradable. So when we get these requests for features, we start like prioritizing them, and then the R&D department just starts working on them. So that's one that we're working on right now because we've had enough customers that have had the same request Kevin did, and it's probably something where it's going to be released in the not too distant future in the next 6 months or so. And everybody that's got a system is going to get the benefit for that. That feature will just kind of come to them for free. So it's kind of like, you buy a Tesla and the software keeps getting better and better as you own it. Same deal with Irrigreen. Like we're very much in that sort of fast software mode where we really, really want to like be responsive to these customers.
How long, when did you release the first product?
So the very first one of these have been around for about 7-8 years. So there's been a lot of testing on these and items like that. So it's a system that's been around and been refined. We're actually on the Irrigreen 2.0 version right now, and we've just released like a new head. Oh, this is really fun. We released a new head last year, coming through this year called an XP head. What's really amazing about the XP head is it actually has like a pressure sensor in it, and it actually does machine learning to sort of forward predict the pressure that's going through, because we've all had, you've all had that, that house where you flush the toilet and the shower kind of comes down a little bit. Well, if we want to be really, really precise, we basically have to compensate for the fact that the water pressure could change inside that pipe. And so what the XP sprinkler head does is it basically sits there and learns how that pressure changes over time, and then in real time adjusts the sprinkler so that it's still spraying that perfect rate. Meanwhile, the water pressure can be going up and down in the pipe itself. It's a really a thing to behold.
Yeah. Yeah, I usually think about that. If it's set at one pressure to know where it's going to go, and that water pressure does change, and that's in a lot of in a lot of locations, that's the case. Our water pressure isn't perfect. It's coming off a water tower, or it's being influenced. Maybe the pipes coming into the house are smaller. And so they're more influenced by that kind of thing. Well, that's what kind of, so it sounds like to me you have a little bit of a community around this. Do you have like a group of folks? Like, do you have a Discord group that people come in and complain or don't complain about things?
A lot of folks on Facebook, but also this is kind of an interesting story, because when I came into this and I studied this with Gary, one of the first things I did as soon as we figured out that it saved about half the water for the same grass growth, like I started to go to all the water tables and all the water rates across the country. And I found out that in a broad swath of the US, like this had about double the return on investment as solar panels did. Like you'd be absolutely financially insane to put solar panels on your roof before you replaced your irrigation system. And when I went in, I thought that that was going to be where we found most of our customers. But then all of a sudden, all these like lawn sites and lawn influencers and people like that popped up, and they got a hold of this product and just took it. If you YouTube Irrigreen, right, you'll see all these guys going through because they wanted a better way to grow the very best grass.
Yeah.
Right. And if you want to grow the very best grass, you need precision watering. And Irrigreen delivered that, where other products, were just frustrating. They had broken heads. They didn't get them to overlap right. They had swampy areas. They had yellow areas. And so they were like, look, I love that it saves water, but I'm here for the greenest grass. I want the best lawn in the neighborhood. And, doing that in like a way where they felt like they were still good stewards for the environment. I think that part played in there too. And so that whole community just really drove the growth at Irrigreen in terms of like, this was just the best way to grow the best grass in the greenest lawn. And so that, it's like you go into one of these things and you think one thing, and then the other customers say, no, this is why I'm buying your product. Keep doing it this way.
Yeah. Well, they find new ways to use it. This is the business I'm in at Gallup, and stuff we never intended to happen all of a sudden starts happening. And you're like, oh, we never thought of that. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
What are you projecting from a head perspective on surviving? It's outside, can get run over, some of those kinds of things. So what are you seeing from a typical build perspective? How long are these heads?
Yeah. So when we engineer it, we basically do accelerated lifetime testing, and we're trying to get all of our components inside there when we do that accelerated testing to last like 12 to 15 years. And that gives us the ability to kind of give confidence to somebody that we want a head that will last them 10 years when they put it in. So that's kind of where we, and that's, longer than most irrigation systems last. The really good part is, you're putting these heads in the middle of the area, not on the edges. So they just get so much less damage. You don't have them getting run over by cars. We've all got that, teenager that backs out of the driveway and runs over the petunias at 4 sprinkler heads. And so it's just a little easier on maintenance. And the fact that you have only, 5 heads for a house versus like 40 heads, it just means you don't have all that headache in terms of, running around all the time, trying to keep track of those mechanical heads.
What's the biggest system you guys have seen installed at this point? How many heads?
So we have like a pro controller that will install like 32 heads. And keeping in mind, each of these heads can water like, 22,000, 2,500 square feet. So this is like an estate, these are huge places like that. And we have some of these places that have 2 pro controllers in them. So possibilities for going to like 60 heads. Those are kind of the largest deployments. But those are almost like, really big parks, things like that as well. Most commonly, it's for houses. So it's people that are installing anywhere between, 1 to 10 to 12 heads. And that's, where the vast majority of our installs are.
Do you have like golf courses? Have they any traction there as far?
Yeah,
They
we've had a
seem to
lot
use
of
a lot of
interest.
water.
We haven't done it yet. We're still poking around. It sounds like we're going to do some experiments with some folks pretty soon that are very hot to bring it in there. We're kind of being dragged in. But we've the first heads, we wanted to nail this for like residential customers, because there's 80 million lawns in the US, right? We're not going to run out of customers. For residential irrigation. So we're starting with that, but we're also looking at, bigger heads and things like that as well for like things like commercial or golf.
Yeah. That would seem like the perfect setup for golf courses. Take a lot of heat for, well, that's probably bad. It's probably a pun, but they take a lot of heat for wasting a lot of water. Cause you think about, Las Vegas and they're, you talk about a water crunch going on there. It's a little better now than it was last year, but you would think that would fit in pretty well. Right. And it looks pretty cool from a responsibility standpoint. It's not water in the lawn. I mean, it's not water in the sidewalk. It's water in the lawn. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And also from like a turf management point of view, having really, really, fine grain ability to put exactly the right amount of water where you want it is a really powerful tool.
Uncle Marv, who's been on the show a bunch, he's down in Florida. He says you can make a killing down there. Do you find, though, in some areas where it rains a little bit more, the watering is a little bit different? Do you guys look at I'm assuming you're getting some data back from what you've deployed.
Yeah. Yeah. Generally, like in Florida in the wet season, it won't water as much. But as soon as you get into parts of Florida, especially like in Western Florida, it gets pretty dry there. Like you can't really keep the grass alive unless you've got an irrigation system. So yeah, we see it all over the country. We're starting to see a lot of like Oregon and Washington and Idaho and places that traditionally maybe haven't had, irrigation systems as much, just as they're getting a little hotter and drier. If you're gonna have that lawn that you really want, having a smart irrigation system, it makes a lot of sense.
Last question for me. I'll throw it out to the live audience to see if they have any questions. I'll also ask you if there's a question I should have asked that I didn't. But have you ever thought about delivering or deploying fertilizer or, chemicals, so to speak, to whether that's for bugs or for, the grass itself? You guys looked at all about delivering? If I could load that in and have it spray out. Now, I don't know if that's illegal.
Well, I can't. No, it certainly is legal, and it's a really weird way. I can't say too much about this, but you can imagine we're R&D folks and we're inkjet printer guys. So this is something that's really interesting to us. But the one thing that captivates me around this is that the reason why a lot of rivers are not swimmable in the US isn't because there's sewage going in them. It's the washed off fertilizer. So it's basically fertilizer that was put on a space, and then that space was irrigated or it rained, and that fertilizer washed in the watershed. And so, as precision printing guys, we think we can probably do a much, much better job of making sure that just the right amount of fertilizer is put in just the right amount of place. So on this one, I will wink and say, stay tuned.
All right. That sounds good. And you didn't lead up to that at all. I was just kind of thinking, I'm always pushing one of those buckets, along and spraying fertilizer all over the place or whatever. And I thought, well, wait a minute. If there's a
better way to do this, and you can be watching TV while it happens.
Exactly. I could be, or watch. Listen, I'll be honest. I'm going to watch this thing. It's like a robot mower. It's not going to run at night when I'm sleeping. I'm going to sit on the deck with a cup of coffee, and I'm going to watch that robot lawnmower.
I've had so many videos sent to me of people like at a little barbecue just being like, Jim, turn your sprinklers on, right? And they're just sitting there with beers and the burgers are going, and they're just watching this thing like cut the precision around all the edges as it waters, and just going, it's a really cool thing to have, not just to save you money, but also just like, this is kind of fun to have in your yard. Like people are getting a lot of enjoyment out of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the concept of both, it's not water. You think of some sprinklers that are turned on and they just water, and sometimes the ground can't absorb that much water that fast. And so just so I'm assuming the cycles run a little bit longer than maybe a
Yeah.
traditional sprinkler?
It depends on what kind of traditional, but it's a little
Mm,
bit on the longer side to run the cycles. And part of that is just we're obsessed with with not wasting water, and we want to make sure that water
yeah,
has a chance to soak in before it runs off.
yeah. Do you also find I use I make coffee with an espresso, and they actually they shoot some water into the grounds to begin with to start
Mhm,
the soaking process, and then it waits a second.
mhm.
Then they start. They're crazy about that. By the way, that's their
Mhm,
proudest thing. They're like, no, 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 we preload the shots
mhm.
so that you get the best possible coffee. I kind of think in summer, especially if the ground's really dry, it may be
Yeah.
helpful to just do a quick run, let it sit for a few minutes, then run a water cycle, right?
Yeah, the sprinkler's able to do that. It's actually able to, when it goes around the first time, it puts down that first run, and then it lets it generally it's about 5 minutes before it'll
Oh,
come back in
okay.
again, and that's
Yeah,
basically just conditioning that soil so the water will not run off it into
right.
your sidewalks and into your drains or anything
Yeah,
else like that.
yeah.
So, it's just a much better it's just much overall, it's just a way smarter way to water, and if you've got a smart home, like, why wouldn't you get something that's a little more intelligent outside your home, right? It's
Yeah,
like you spend
yeah.
all this time getting your lighting right and in really thinking about the technology around your home. Get the technology right outside your home too. It'll help, and it's good for the environment. You're a good steward, but it also is going to really help you grow beautiful, beautiful landscaping.
I get frustrated with traditional watering devices, whether it's the or the ones that shoot high in the air.
Yeah.
In Nebraska, we struggle with a wind, right?
Mm.
Do you
Oh,
guys is that a problem with a
yeah.
sprinkler like this? Is wind a problem?
If you look at a traditional irrigation system in the wind, because they spray, it's lots of these little droplets. So if there's any wind coming, then all your watering is basically just blowing down the street, getting people's cars all messed up and everything else like that as well. If you look at the Irrigreen, and you can put that video back on, but you actually see all the streams, we call them semi-coherent. We really want them to be more like much larger drops. And the reason for that is twofold. One is does so much better in the wind than a standard irrigation system. And the second one is if you have little droplets, the problem is that they stay on the blades of the grass. And you'd think that grass could drink from the leaves, but it can't. It can only drink from the roots. So that
Mm,
little drop of dew on the piece of grass is just going to evaporate and is not going to help that grass grow. You need bigger drops that will actually penetrate into the soil so they can get to the roots. So less evaporation, much better in wind. And that's the reason those streams were identified to be a little heavier like that.
yeah, yeah. That was always very frustrating to me. I would get you go out there and I would see a mist of water floating over the lawn, and you're like, hey, wait a
I
minute,
paid
that's
for that.
and maybe someone needs to get on and engineer grass so it can absorb the water through the leaves. That wouldn't that be
Yeah,
good?
I don't you'd have to have roots sticking up there or
In
something.
your part of the country, redwood trees grow along the
Mm,
coast, right?
mhm,
And what's really unique about redwood trees, no other tree does this, is redwood trees, because they get so much water at the top of the canopy, they
mhm,
actually have roots that
mhm,
grow out of some parts of the top of the canopy to capture that water and
mhm.
to bring it in, which is super cool. So maybe we could cross redwood trees with grass and get because it would be nice. Now it doesn't work. You're right. You got to
I
get it
love
down.
it, as long as I don't have to mow those redwoods.
That's true. That's true. They tried to mow him down in the
Yeah,
40s, but
yeah,
but
yeah,
hopefully they're on the way
yeah.
back. What
Well, I
else? What did I forget that I
Well, I
that I
really
should have asked?
encourage, it's really fun to play around with that design tool that we did today. So I
Mhm.
encourage you, if you've got a yard and you're at all curious, just go in there. And there's a little e-commerce site where you can get see the different versions of the software, but you can also go in and just put in your address and kind of figure out, draw your lawn, draw the little outlines on your lawn and put those digital heads in. And you get to see, okay, what exactly would an Irrigreen system look like? And it also show you how much water you'll save.
Is
So it's a
is
really fun thing to do just to kind of understand irrigation a little better, whether you decide to do it or not. But it's cool to see, and it's cool to see what we call your lawn print, which is basically your unique configuration of where your grass is and where
Mhm.
these digital heads would be.
Mhm. Is was my example about
Mhm.
$1,900 to put in
Mhm.
that first head? Is that a pretty
Yeah.
typical for a one head system? Is that pretty typical?
Pretty typical for a one head system. And generally, like most systems will be, somewhere to like that $2,000 to $3,000 for, so reasonably shaped yard somewhere in there. Now, remember that the equipment is more expensive, but by the time you put the install time in, because it's about a third the time to install compared to a regular system.
Right.
So if you're having somebody install it for you, well, as soon as you got a little bigger yard, like maybe like a 5-zone yard or something else like that, it's about the same cost, but this one's going to save you so much on water. So it's really a good deal to put in. If you're DIYing it, I don't know about you, but I don't want to be digging all that trench and pipe. If I can dig 80% less trench and pipe, that's a more fun project.
Yeah. This was one of the things that was attractive to me as I was looking at this, was to be like, oh, you mean I could just do one head? Like this would get the whole front? Because that's why, I'll be honest, that's why I've never put irrigation in the front to begin with, because I would need to do the traditional around the outside.
Yeah, not a fun project if you got to dig the whole perimeter.
That's a lot of digging, and that's a lot of. Uncle Marv in chat says I should have waited for this instead of installing my wireless Rainbird controller in his. And there is some DIY going on in the smart space where folks are taking the traditional irrigation systems and adding a smart manifold to it. That's kind of another segment of the market that's doing those kinds of things as well. If you have
there are companies that make like smart controllers, and then they basically can control those manifolds or those valves on that part as well. But remember, you're controlling that part's smart, but the sprinkler heads are still dumb, right? They're still like, as soon as you turn it on, they're just kind of spraying all over the place. So about 40% of Irrigreen's water savings comes from the printing part, printing the water out versus spraying it.
Yeah.
So if you're going to get a smart system, consider getting 100% smart system and having the heads be smart too.
Yeah. No, I like it. Shane, anything else before? I wanted to honor the hour that I had for you tonight. Anything else before I let you go for the evening?
No, other than like a lot of people will already have a sprinkler system, and about half of our customers are retrofitting systems they have. So if you have a sprinkler system already, it's so much easier just to kind of use some of the existing pipe to switch over to digital. So that's something that you can certainly consider and feel free. If you ever want to talk about any of this, we have what we call irrigation pros, which are just people that are really trained in irrigation that you can set up an appointment with just to kind of have a consultation on your yard. Yeah. And that's all free.
Okay.
So you can just set that up and schedule one of those on the Irrigreen website.
Okay. It's all right there. Irrigreen, IRRIGREEN.com. You can go out there, put your address in. You can map your grass, map both front and back if you want, whatever you want to do. Get some pricing on it, get those questions answered. Because I don't know anything about irrigation. I mean, I can glue PVC together. I know probably more about inside plumbing than I know about outside plumbing. So if I were to do something like that, I'd also have to get under a sidewalk. Like that's always the intimidating thing.
I'll give you the little piece. If you get a hose and a little attachment for it, you actually can use the hose to tunnel under a sidewalk. It is really fun.
Really?
Yeah. So water is your friend for getting underneath sidewalks.
What you're saying is you turn the hose on and then jam it under and
basically there's a little pipe on it and you just kind of jam that pipe with the water. It's amazingly easy. So that's my sneak tip for the program.
better to install in the spring or in the fall.
Fall is actually a really good time to install. A lot of people don't know this, but as soon as like the peak summer months pass, if you can get it in the fall, then your grass can like sort of recover, go dormant during the winter. And then by the springtime comes, it's all healed up and you're ready for just like that great yard right in the spring. A lot of people wait till the spring to do the install, and then you got your yard kind of ripped up until everything gets better. Mm-hmm. We really recommend, if you can, install that, start that install in the fall.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be that's here, at least in the northern hemisphere.
Yeah.
That is. Are you doing many sales outside the U.S.? Is this something, or are you guys
mostly limited? The U.S. right now? We get calls all the time from all over the world. We're honestly, the company is growing so fast right now in the U.S. where it's about all we can handle right now. So we're figuring out how we can accommodate those. But most of our sales are in the U.S. right now. So if you happen to be in the U.S., you're lucky, and the Australia people that keep emailing us will get to you as soon as we can.
Yeah. Okay. So you have to make me one promise, Shane, though, on all of this. Okay. So years ago, I interviewed the CEO of Ring, before they were purchased by Amazon.
Yeah.
Right. So it was they had just come off of Shark Tank, and they turned down the offer. And so he came on the program, and we chatted, and it was fun. Ring wasn't anything like it was today.
Yeah.
They're a big deal. He won't answer my calls anymore.
All right.
You get big.
I will still take a call.
He won't answer. I pinged him a couple years ago and said, "Hey, would you come back on?" Yeah, no, he's not going to come back on. But I appreciate
I'll always take a call.
you doing that as well. Anything else you want to add? If I was going to do something, do you guys offer Black Friday deals? Is there?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Look around on that. I think right now there's actually a deal being offered just in the next few days. So if you go online, ask to see if there's a $500 off deal. So in the next couple days, if you go on, I think you can still take advantage of that.
Is that something?
And then just have them also mention this. They saw it on like Home Gadget or something else like that. And I'll give the sales folks a thing. We don't do that super often. So if you are thinking about doing something, then jumping on it in the next couple of days. I know that's running at least until maybe Monday.
We'll publish. This will publish Saturday sometime.
Okay, so I think you'll have some time there. You'll have some time before the end of day. Monday.
If they're listening to it a week or two later, and maybe they mention Home Gadget Geeks in it, or contact.
Give it a try. Give it a try on that one. I'll try to put a word out if they come from your place. I know I've got it through Monday. After that,
how do I get to that on the site? Right? Would it show up in the cart? If I was checking out, where would that show up?
For those usually, if you check out you can check out in the cart, but also if you work with a salesperson as well, there's a little thing of call a salesperson or something else like that. They can get that extra discount for you, or just email us once you've got the cart together.
Yeah. Perfect. No, that's a healthy discount.
Yeah, it's a good deal.
Okay. Super good. Well, I will let you go. Thanks for coming on, and thanks for doing this. Exciting to see where things are headed for you guys here in the future. I'll hold you to Shane. I will hold you to coming back on if this thing gets super big. With that, if someone came along and threw a whole bunch of money, would you sell the company? Is that something that would? Is that where you're headed with this?
Right now, we're trying to make the biggest impact we possibly can, right? Okay. Not just for financially, but also just that this is a better way to irrigate. You get greener grass, and you also get the wind for the environment. So, the way to build that right now is to build the company as fast as we can right now, building great quality products. And in terms of what the future holds, we don't know, but, I think there's lots of different ways to grow it.
That's a great CEO answer. You've done your job. Haven't given away too much. Nicely done. You've done a lot of these. Thanks for taking the hour.
My pleasure. This was so much fun. And thanks for the great questions. I love geeking out on this stuff.
Yeah, this is a super nerdy community, and you'll probably get some more questions. So I will return you to your program already in progress. Thanks for coming out. You can just go ahead and close out of the browser, and I'll give you a ping when this thing goes live over the weekend.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. That was really fun.
Great meeting you, and thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. All right, take care. A couple reminders on the way out. Super fun. Talk to Shane. Shane, again, thanks for coming on and being a part of that. It did remind me a little bit of the ring days when we had. I'm blanking on his name. I'm not doing that on purpose because he wouldn't return my call. Maybe somebody in the chat room. Jamie Siminoff. There we go. It came to me. Jamie Siminoff came on. It kind of reminded me a little bit of that, and I hope these guys do well. They reached out to me, and I thanks John. Yeah, John got that in there. Thanks for staying for the whole show, John. Appreciate that. Hopefully they do well. This is kind of cool. I may do something like this. I've been holding off on irrigating the front yard, and just because I didn't want to put in, to be honest with you, I didn't want to put in a bunch of sprinklers. I wasn't. Every time I thought about that, I was like, my neighbor does this, and my neighbor is one of the three. He doesn't listen to the show, so I think I'm okay. He's one of the three that in the mornings I go out and water is running down the sidewalk. And John says Jamie left Amazon. Maybe he'll talk with you. Well, they always do. They don't stay around very long, right? On that, I don't know. Yeah, maybe I don't even know if I have Jamie's email address anymore. I have to look that. So yeah, my neighbors does this, and I was like, God, want to be a good steward of water. Maybe I got to get McCabe back on, right? We haven't had McCabe on in a while. And maybe I should get him on. We spend some time thinking about this. He's got a full system going on. Jim Shoemaker says, hate watering. Better to let the grass grow longer and investigate drought-tolerant plantings. Yeah. No, Jim, that's definitely it's some things that I have thought about. I do like. I've been slowly removing grass out of the backyard, but I like grass in the front yard. And if this could help me water it more efficiently. Like right now, I don't need the water on it. It's doing. It hasn't stopped raining since the beginning of July, so it wouldn't have watered it at all. But to get, I do water it in really dry periods, and something like this, $1,500 or something like that. To get something like that in, it's cheaper than a robot lawnmower right now. Just saying. So Brian said, great interview. Enjoyed. Glad you did. And thanks for coming out. Well, I'm going to give it some serious consideration over the weekend and think through it. That may be something I'll be honest. The install is a little intimidating to me because I would want to DIY it. And for one head, I could dig that. It's a little bit of work. I mean, we'll wait for the fall for those kinds of things to happen. Well, anyways, big thanks. Shane Dyer coming out, Irrigreen, Irrigreen. If you want to check that out, at least go out and map it, give it a try, do some things out there, and give it give it a run. Kevin says transitioning parts of my lawn to native plants and prairie restoration. Yeah, me too. A lot of that's getting consumed with some things, some flowering plants and some beds for the pollinators and some of those kinds of things. It's fun. Little plants that are a little more drought tolerant. Those kinds of things. So a little less grass. It is nice to have some, to be honest with you. Nice to have a little grass. We are live. Well, I should say we are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern. Big thanks to Maple Grove Partners, of course, Christian out there. Secure, reliable, high-speed hosting from people that you know and you trust. That's Christian. Plans start at $10 a month if you need somebody, and he'll host just about anything. If you need it, give him a ring. MapleGrovePartners.com. I'm off next week, and I don't know about the week after that. I may take 2 weeks off, but for you live folks, if you've made it this far, you guys are the ones that come out every week. I may be taking that. And then on the 7th, I have Paul Barron scheduled. So we're going to catch up with Paul. Lots of changes going on in his world, and we'll catch up with him. Want to thank you guys for coming out. I won't do any post show, but with that, thanks for coming out. We'll see you back here in maybe a couple weeks. I don't know, it could be next week. We'll see what we got. Thanks for coming out. Have a great evening. Go water your lawns. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.